Hello, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving to all of those out there who celebrate. There's so much to be grateful for. I personally am grateful for each and every one of you for following us across the world. It is USA Global TV and Radio, and I am Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, the president, founder, and chief listening officer here at our network. Our show today is Hot Topic, and I just love this graphic because it just reminds me of being free and liberated and being able to express ourselves. And today, our hot topic is going to be brought to us by a New York Times best-selling author, TOSCA LEE. She has quite an interesting backstory, and she is very open to having you reach out to her. Any questions you might have about writing or about the work that she's been doing. Let's welcome her to the show. She's joining us from Nebraska. Hello.
Hi, Dr. JACALYN. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so impressed with your background. You have had many ups and downs in your life. You've had many iterations of your life. And yet here you are, New York Times bestselling author, which is so coveted. It's like people reach and they never quite get there. It's like, how did she do it? So let's kind of dive right in. Let's talk about your work as an author and then go backwards, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
So from what I read, you started out writing, but you weren't immediately accepted with open arms. There was some rejection. Tell us about that.
So I never actually thought about writing as a thing when I was younger. I really wanted to be a ballerina as a young person. So that was the goal of my young life until I had an injury as a teen that really set me back. And that's the point when I thought, okay, I'm going to go off to college. I'm going to look into going into business or advertising, or I don't know. At some point, one of my parents said maybe you should become a news anchor or something like that. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll check into that. But it was my freshman year, and I came home to Nebraska. I'm the only person I know who goes home to Nebraska while all my friends are going somewhere warm. I came home to Nebraska for spring break. And I was chatting with my dad, and I was talking about how great novels are like roller coasters with the twists and turns and loops. And I remember that day I just blurted out to my dad, I think I'd like to try to write a novel. And the idea was maybe I could try to create a roller coaster that somebody else could enjoy the way that I had enjoyed the books of my favorite authors. And so this was 1989. And my dad said something that would change my life that day. He said, okay, TOSCA, I'll make you a deal. He said, I will pay you what you would have made working at the bank this summer, which is what my summer job was. I had done it the summer before. I was a bank teller. I wasn't a very good one at all. I don't do numbers very well. I don't remember names and faces very well. All things that are important if you work at a bank. And my dad said, hey, I will pay you what you would have made working at the bank this summer if you write your first novel, do it first full time, and treat it like a job. And so I seized that opportunity and I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. And so that summer, I wrote my first novel. It was bad. I had no idea that in one summer, forgotten I was supposed to go away the first part of the summer and study economics overseas, another math thing I'm not great at. And 2 months was probably not enough time to write my epic, sweeping, historical novel about the Neolithic people of Stonehenge. But because I didn't know that was probably not enough time, I did it because nobody told me I couldn't. And so I wrote my first novel, and that was the summer of 1989. I tried to get it published. I sent it off to New York agents, and I got soundly rejected. I will never forget. I sent it off to Writer's House, which is one of the premier New York agencies, and the letter, I rediscovered it a couple years ago, and it was mortifying. The poor soul that had to read my my manuscript, wrote back and said, your plot lacks tension, your characters are two-dimensional. However, it is strangely reminiscent of Clan of the Cave of all time. And so that was enough for me to be encouraged and to keep going. And so that was 1989. I wrote my second novel for many years during the 90s, never quite finished it. Eventually started writing what would become my my first published novel at the end of the 90s, and wrote it very quickly in 6 weeks. And I remember thinking, this is it. The angels have sung, and this is meant to be. And sent it off to agents and publishers and all that stuff again, and got rejected systematically. It wasn't until 2006 that a new editor at a publishing house that had already rejected me once before, said, you know what, I love it. I want to take it. What else have you got? And so I signed a 3-book deal at that time. And my first novel, which was Demon, a Memoir, which is not a memoir, it's a novel, came out the following year. So after all those years, it was a long road, but the first one came out then, and I've had 11 since, and number 12 comes out May of next year. So.
Wow, what an incredible story. And that was a long period of time. How did you mentally, spiritually keep yourself going, saying, you know what, I know I'm really talented. I know I have something to share, even though I'm getting rejections. What did you do? Was it what your father instilled in you?
I think part of it was that. Part of it too was I had grown up as a dancer and a pianist, and the dancing was very important to me. And I really think I took a lot away from that life. The ballet world is one where, you never quite achieve perfection. You always try. I learned that discipline at a young age. And, at the end of the day, I love stories. I love stories, whether it's told on the stage as a ballet dancer, whether it's told through music. I was a pianist. Whether it's told on the screen, story. And so I think that kind of sustained me. And this idea of, well, nobody said, if you get rejected, you're not going to die, right? So you just keep trying. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is somebody can say no yet again. I didn't know for sure if I was any good at it or not, but I continued to learn along the way, and I kept trying. And I think that's the key. I mean, not just for writing, but for anything that you're passionate about, anything you want to try to do in your life, just keep trying. And so I loved it. I love writing. And if you love it, just keep trying. And that's at the end of the day, that's all I did.
And sometimes I think it's a matter of timing when the universe, it's like, this is the right time. So you've been classically trained as a ballerina and as a pianist. You're very well educated, and you've also had success in pageantry, and that's a whole other area of
whole other.
We have a whole different show on about that. What can you share with our viewers and listeners on that?
Okay, well, I never grew up doing pageants, and that was a mysterious world that other people were a part of, and I was not a part of. And had I known more about it, maybe I would have investigated it when I was younger. But what happened is I was in my late 20s. I was married for the first time, and it was a friend of my mother who said, why don't you run for Mrs. Nebraska? And I remember thinking, first of all, that's a really odd thing to think about doing. But also I remember thinking, why not? And so I thought, well, I'll look into it. And, it was a whole different world from anything I was used to. You do an interview with a bunch of judges, half the pageant. This is the married one, so it's a little different from the Miss pageants. Your talent as a married woman is being a wife, a mother, a career person, all those things. And so interview is very important. but of course, then you've got to walk on the stage in a swimsuit and an evening gown. And so at the end of the day, it's, if you walk away with the title, which is what I call it, because with that title and with that platform, you're able to draw attention to great organizations and charities throughout the state. I spent the entire year as Mrs. Nebraska highlighting, the work and raising money for juvenile diabetes and breast cancer awareness and prevention and the American Lung Association and different things like that. So yeah, but it was definitely, I had never done that before. And so when I went off to the national pageant, I remember getting there and feeling completely cowed. There I was in Las Vegas with, 3, 4, 5 suitcases of clothing and stuff like that. But I made some lifelong friendships there and met some incredible women. And when it was done, it was like, okay, great. I've done that. I can check that box off in my life. I will tell you though, one thing I learned, I worked with a pageant coach who is not probably what you might imagine. He didn't teach me how to walk or anything like that. He worked with me on my interview. And one of the things is, we're all aware that we're being judged at any moment, but we're not concerned about the judgments being placed upon us. And that's something that has served me very well in my life as a novelist, as someone who is, especially on social media. And so, it was a kind of a weird chapter in my past, but it was one that has taught me many lessons and served me very well.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And I love the fact that you have this openness and this curiosity to put yourself out there and try different things, because that really is how we learn. And I also feel that opportunities present themselves at a certain time in our life. And if we don't take advantage of them, then that's really missed. But from what I've learned from interviewing other people who've been in pageants, there is something that you really take away in addition to that community that you have with others, but it's that sense of presence and that self-esteem that you can get on a stage and you can command respect and you can share your story. And so you also have a lot of experience in corporate at major organizations that people would know of. What can you tell us about your learning experience there?
Mine said, you might be really good at this. And I thought, I'll give it a try. So I worked for many years as a consultant for the Gallup organization. The Gallup organization is best known for its polls, but in fact, it also does a lot of work in the areas of employee engagement, customer engagement with Fortune 500 companies and global corporations. So it was a great chapter in my life, getting to work with managers, getting to coach leaders and meet with them and to do this throughout the world. It was a great opportunity to travel and see the world, meet many different people. Also, it really informed my, the Gallup organization. Some of you may be familiar with the Strengths Finder, which is a Gallup product and based on over 50 years of research. And so it really informed my approach to doing things that we're good at and acting along the grain of who we are as opposed to against it. And working with our strengths as opposed to spending time focusing on our weaknesses, which is how many of us were raised remedially to work on our weaknesses rather than really invest in those areas where we are the most strong and the most naturally talented and gifted. And so that was a great period in my life for me to learn about that, the power of positivity, the power of positive psychology, to get to see the world and to have an impact on the corporate culture of many large companies that are everyday names that we've all heard of today. So it was great. I absolutely loved it. the problem was that when it came time, when my writing career took off, it came time to make the decision: do you continue to do this thing? Do you continue to be a consultant, or do you take on this growing writing career and go with that? And it was really kind of a frightening decision. I was a single person by then, and you know, totally on my own, trying to, you know, make the best decision for my future. And I have to say, one of the scariest things about making the leap to writing full time was giving up my health insurance at my company. So that was really scary. But you know, there comes a moment. There are those forks in the road that happen to us in our lives, and that was a big one for me, where it was either go this way and really commit, or go this way and stay the course. So I chose to go that way.
Thank you so much. I totally can relate to what you're saying about healthcare. I left corporate in 2020, and the best healthcare ever. And now it's like, whoa, it's a different world. Nobody prepares you for that.
It's scary to give that up, right?
Yes,
you don't think about it until it's at that time, but then you're like, wow, it's frightening.
Yeah. But we keep going. We keep going. So now you've left Gallup. You're going to focus full time on writing. Before we delve into that, which we're going to, for people out there who are doing side gigs, right? They're writing on the side and they're afraid, like you just said, to jump into being a full time author. Do you have to have a contract in order? Like, what is the encouragement you need to know that, okay, let me jump in? Is it just a feeling you have? Is it that somebody's writing a check and saying, okay, we believe in you? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think if you're writing, then you're a writer. So it's not a question of legitimacy, even though every writer I know, myself included, deals with imposter syndrome on a daily. That it's just about, if you're deciding whether to go this way or this way, to leave your job or not to write, I think it just comes down to some very basic things. Can you support yourself and your loved ones that you are responsible for? Can you make it work? How long can you make it work for? Do you have a backup plan? Do you have some savings? Do you have a contract in place? So I think it just comes down to practical items like that. For me, it was a question of taking a new contract that would have supported me, or not taking it. It's just, I could not give my energy both places fully at the same time. So I either had to be a consultant or I had to be a writer, but I got to the point where I could not do both effectively anymore. So that was kind of what caused the fork in the road for me. So I think it just comes down to some practical things like that. It's always helpful if you have the support of people who believe in you. If you have other people who can help support you financially as well, that makes the decision a little easier as well. So, but it's a practical matter. And even with the practicality of it, even with the economics of it, there always does come a time where it's time to jump or not. And it's always a little scary. But as you said, I think that you have a feeling in your heart that maybe this is the right way to go. And you know what? Maybe this is not the right decision for the rest of your life, but maybe it's the right decision for right now.
I like that a lot. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, it's 2022 and 2010, you start writing full time, and now you're going to have your 12th novel, and you become a New York Times best-selling author in what year? 2010, 2011?
It was around 2011-ish in there. Yeah, around
That's
2011.
quite an accomplishment.
So. Right after just making that decision. So, you know, it paid off in that case. Yeah.
So for people who are out there and they see New York Times best-selling author, what does that mean exactly? What do you have to do to achieve that status?
Yeah, so it is kind of a coveted thing in the writing world, but you know, at the end of the day, it just means that you sold enough books, or you had enough pre-orders to sell enough books your, opening week after your book released, or at some point in the life of your book. that you hit the list. And the list is determined, it's kind of mysterious. There's lots of articles about it. The list is determined, of course, by sales and the popularity of your book, that kind of thing. Is it the end all be all? No, but is it really great to have after your name? Of course. I mean, it's a really nice thing to have. And I'll never forget how I found out about it. I've hit the list a few times. I've been fortunate enough, but the very first time I was on a plane and I was getting ready to turn my phone off, because you remember, if you're on a plane, you have to turn your electronics off, all that stuff. And a friend of mine texted me with a picture of the New York Times list that had just come out, and there I was on it. And then I had to turn my phone off. So it's not like I could call a bunch of people or anything like that. And so I turned my phone off, the plane takes off, and I turned to the lady next to me and I said, I just hit the New York Times bestseller list, and when we get into the year, I'm going to have a glass of wine. Would you like one? And that's how I celebrated.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible. So nobody reaches out to you to tell you this. I mean, nobody from New York Times sends an email or contacts you or your agent or anything to let you know.
Well, your publisher will eventually, or your agent might hear from your publisher. The publishers keep an eye on that, but I had a friend who was watching it closely on my behalf, and so she beat them all.
That's so exciting. So how, if at all, did your life change after that?
You know, you're given a little more clout as an author. I had been teaching writing and speaking about writing. That's something I do. It's a big part of my life as an author, is teaching as well. It's something I did for the Gallup organization, and something I did before. I used to also teach. I used to teach at a junior college. So teaching is something I've always enjoyed, and I think it just gives you a little more credibility as a teacher, list, and all that stuff. So, but otherwise, in practical ways, you sell some more books, you make a little more money, but at the end of the day, the next book is the next book, and it starts from scratch, just like every other project. It's just like every other book anyone's ever written. So you're always starting over from zero, and so every book is a fresh new book, and it's a fresh new day, starting from scratch all over again.
Thank you, TOSCA. For people who are really interested in reading your books, how would you describe the evolution from book 1 to book 12? Are there synergies across all of them, or are they all completely different?
Books were biblical in nature. I wrote a lot of biblical fiction. I wrote a book about Eve as in Adam and Eve. I wrote a book about Judas Iscariot, one about the Queen of Sheba. And after the Sheba book, which is called The Legend of Sheba, I made a turn into thrillers. And so I've got a book called The Progeny, and the sequel is called Firstborn. And then also The Line Between, which came out in 2019, and its sequel, A Single Light, which also came out in 2019. And that duology happened to be a pandemic duology. And so it was very strange having this pandemic book and its sequel come out right before I got the biblical stuff and then the thrillers. The book that's coming out in next year in 2023 is a World War II book that I've written with my friend Marcus Brotherton, and this is a kind of a departure for me. It's a World War II story, and it's the story of 3 best friends who enlist and are serving in the Philippines when Pearl Harbor is bombed, which launches the Philippines directly into the war, and they become part of the terrible chapter in history that's known as the Bataan Death March, and become prisoners of war for several years. And so it's a story of resilience and hope and friendship and love. And so that comes out next year. So a little bit different there. Historical again, but a little different.
Congratulations. That's really exciting. And
thank you.
What kind of research, what time commitment did you have to make for that?
That's a great question. research is a huge part of my job. Obviously, if I'm writing about Judas Iscariot in the first century Israel, and writing about this chapter in church history and religious history, and the commitment was huge. And so for that book especially, I researched for 18 months straight, full time, treating it like a job, just like my dad taught me very early on. And so that was probably one of the biggest research commitments. The World War II story that takes place in the Philippines was there's research there too. It's a little more readily available than when you're writing about something 2,000 or even 3,000 years ago in the case of the Queen of Sheba. That brings its own set of challenges because it is more recent. People do remember that part of history. You have to get it right. Well, you have to always get it right anyway, but people actually remember different details about that time period. So it brings its own set of pressures with it. But I find the research fascinating. And it's really funny because when I grew up, I never really thought that I liked history. I always thought that this is like a mothball type subject and kind of boring or whatever. But whenever I research for a book, I just find it fascinating. And I actually will not outline a book until I've done the research. So even in the case of the Progeny, which is a current day thriller, and a lot of it is set in Europe, I went over to Europe and I walked the streets in Croatia and Hungary and different places to set my book. And I didn't even delve into trying to craft the story or outline it until I had done that, because so much of my story was informed by the places I went and the things that I saw and the various places I visited. So research is not only vitally important, but it's one of the joys, I would say, of this job. And I try to share that with my readers. And so that is the reason that I've got a Pinterest board for every one of my books. And so in the case of the Progeny, for instance, I share actual locations and things in the book so readers can follow along or see the actual places. And so I think that's really fun. It's why I also on occasion will teach a course, for instance, about the Queen of Sheba, what we know about her, things like that. I do that through our local university. It's just a chance to actually utilize some of the research that may or may not have made it into the book, but you still have to do it all the same. So really fun.
It's fascinating how you've continued to evolve and to grow, and then to take everything that you're learning and share it with others. And my understanding is, in addition to all the mentoring and the writing and the teaching that you do, that you also are a podcaster. Is that correct?
I'm not a podcaster in that I don't have my own, but I'm on podcasts quite a lot. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to join people and get to talk about all different kinds of things. It may not be writing. It may just be living. It may be, in 2016, I married my husband, and I live on a farm. And I was a city girl before that, and I was single, and I suddenly became a mother to four. I married a single father, and I'm a farm wife now. So it may not be just about writing. It may be about farm life, or the funny things that happen here. I call it the funny farm. There's always something funny happening, especially when you come from a city setting. And, there's always something interesting or funny happening, whether it's a neighbor's chicken. So there's always something to talk about. It may not always be writing, which is its own thing, but farm living is there's a lot of stories to tell for sure.
Is there a book coming, a forthcoming book about farming?
It's funny because I've been asked to write a story about how I met my husband and all this stuff, and it could happen. You never know.
Well, first of all, thanks to your husband, because I know farming is very difficult, and yet we depend so much on the farmers, and it's not an easy life from what I've read. So thanks to you and your husband, and to everybody there who is keeping the farm going and feeding us.
Yes, thank you. Yes, they are feeding the world. That's for sure.
Are there certain crops that you all specialize in?
So he grows corn and soybeans, which goes into, so many different products. The corn can be used as feed, but it can also be used as high fructose corn syrup, which is a product in a lot of our foods. The soybeans, lots of things can happen with those. So those, I would say, are probably the main crops that are produced here in Nebraska. And also, you know, some of it's used as feed for Costco chickens. You know, we all like our Costco rotisserie chickens, the $5, $6, maybe now, I don't know how much they are now, the chickens that we buy at Costco. So, you know, they're feeding everything from the chickens that we buy at Costco to humans. So, and it's a fun life. It definitely is. We don't have animals. That's a whole different thing. But it's definitely a very interesting and cyclical lifestyle. And it's one that I appreciate and understand. Writer getting together would really understand each other as far as their careers go. But we really do, because we have our quiet times and we have our busy go times. When he's harvesting, it's like deadline time for him. And I understand that very well. And we're both very good at taking care of each other and feeding each other and making lunch and things like that for each other when it's our busy time. So yeah, we actually understand each other very well that way.
That's beautiful. And I've always been fascinated with technology and farming, which is a whole other thing we'll talk about some other time. But
so there's so much of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I come from New Jersey, and there are a ton of farms in New Jersey, and you see all these huge pieces of equipment. It's like, what is that? It's amazing.
And there's computers in all of it. I mean, there's computer screens everywhere in the farming, you know, world these days. So yeah, very, very big on technology.
Yeah, that's a whole other show that we could have. I'm counting like 5, 6, 7 shows that we could have after this. But getting back to the writing. So in your work as a teacher and also as a mentor, are there some common themes that come up over and over again with people when it comes to writing? Maybe it's writer's block, or you mentioned imposter syndrome or fear, or maybe not knowing how to hone in on a topic or develop characters.
For sure. I'd say the biggest thing that is across the board, whatever genre you're writing in, wherever you are in your career, whether you're starting out or whether you're several novels in or many novels in, that imposter syndrome, but also it just boils down to fear. And writers are dealing with fear on a regular basis. And that's not unusual. We deal with fear in every career, any career we do. But there's something about writing where you're combating fear on a regular daily basis, and sometimes an hourly basis. And that's the reason why when I go and teach, one of my first rule of writing that I always tell people is to write as though no one will ever read it. And that seems counterintuitive, especially if you are hoping to get your work published. But the reason I say that is because it takes away this performance anxiety. It takes away worrying what people will think about what you're doing. And I always say, you know, write as though you're writing in your secret favorite notebook with a flashlight in your closet at night. You're writing your good secret stuff. You're getting your good authentic writing in there. You're not worrying about what your parents, your neighbor, or whoever else is going to think about it. And I always tell people too that if you are not published yet, that you should really take advantage of that time in your life, because you're in a very protected space. You're not out on Amazon getting ranked next to a blender. You are writing in a, you know, you can be as authentic and as brave and audacious as you want to be, because you're not worried about all that stuff yet. So take advantage of that time and, you know, soar with your bad self and write your good stuff. So that's what I tell people.
That's great direction. That gives people the encouragement and the empowerment to get themselves out there and stop coming up with excuses about, you know, we see images of people, I'll do it next year, I'll do it. No, do it now. Get it out there.
Right. Yeah,
Exactly.
It takes the pressure off. Yeah.
Yeah. And something else I just want to mention is that everybody doesn't have to be a full-time author, right? They can write in their spare time, and whatever it is, everyone has their own goal, their own mission. So
absolutely. And in fact, many famous writers have written on the commute to work. They took a train into the city or whatever it was. I believe that's how John Grisham started. Was taking the train into the city to work. I have friends who do that. They write on their commute, and it's just that, hour or less than an hour, but you put that much time in every day, and you can produce books, and good ones. So yeah, it doesn't have to be full time. Mm-hmm.
And Tosca, when you are writing with this new book coming out in 2023, are you writing to achieve a certain awards, continuing with New York Times bestseller? What is the goal? Is it the reader? Is it something new? Tell us.
My first goal is always to entertain. That's why people pick up novels. They pick up novels to be transported and to even, to be transported away from our daily hassles or our daily woes or whatever it is, whether you're, just in a stressful lifetime or you're taking care of ailing parents, you're going through a divorce, whatever it is. We read to escape. Even if we're on vacation and we're living our best life, we're still reading to escape. And so my first goal is always to offer that escape and that portal to somewhere else where that a reader can go and enjoy an adventure from the safety of their favorite reading chair, their beach chair, whatever it is. Secondly, I also I write to educate as well. So whether it's a chapter in history that they may know something about, but maybe I can offer some new insights, or whether it's a part of the world that they've never explored before and they'd like to run through those streets virtually in the pages of a novel. I also write to educate, but let's face it, if we were all reading just to learn, we'd be reading nonfiction. So the first goal is always to entertain, always to capture attention, always to keep the reader reading past bedtime, calling into work, the next day or whatever. Anytime I get an email from somebody who said, I called into school or work or whatever sick because I stayed up too late, don't want to encourage that, but I also secretly high five myself whenever that happens.
I love that. I love it. Tosca, I want to share your website right now so that people know how to reach out to you and they can actually have a visual of your book. So if you would, I'm going over here now, if you can just walk me through where to go.
Yeah, so this is my website. This is my most recent book. This is Single Light. It's the sequel to The Line Between. And so if you go up to the books tab, you'll see all of my books there, the upcoming books as well, and then also some fun things that you can get as well. I've got some t-shirts and other writing type stuff, and I've got a cool candle that goes with the Progeny books that smells so good. And so the books are there. The Lost Stories, that's a little short story that goes with the Progeny books, and then these are my all my wow, it looks like a lot when you go like that.
Yeah, I love the covers, by the way.
Thank you. I can't take any credit for those because artists who know what they're doing do that, but so those are the books, and then down there's other stuff as well that goes with the different titles and stuff like that.
So I think what's really cool about what you've done is that you've branched out to have a business in addition to the books. There's like a whole series of ways people can connect with you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's important because, you read a book, and if it resonates with you or you enjoy it, you might want to reach out to the author. By the way, I always appreciate whenever a reader writes to me, especially because I have written to other authors to tell them how much their books meant to me. And you know what? It was nerve-wracking. I was nervous. I mean, I was like, my heart was beating. So anytime someone reaches out to me, I really appreciate it because I understand that it can be a little nerve-wracking to do that. I love connecting with readers. One of the weird blessings that came out of the pandemic is that while we were all stuck at home, I was able to spend time connecting on a nightly basis for over 2 months. I did this every single night with my readers, and I read to them on Facebook Live. Spent time with them. I don't know if they tuned in for me or my dog, who is more popular than me, but we had good times together. So I really love connecting with readers and knowing more about their lives. And then the other merchandise on my site just kind of goes to support the stories, because, you know, when you enter a story world and you love it and you have a great time, sometimes you want to take a piece of that with you. So we have some fun items that go with the books as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
and I just love how authentic and down to earth and real you are. You're a real person that people can really connect with and relate to.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Anywhere else on the website that you want me to go?
Well, you know what? The books are there. I keep my calendar there. There's not much on it now. It's kind of cleared out for the end of the year. Every now and then I blog, but I'm not very disciplined about that. So there's not a lot of blogs there, but the contact is really important. So if people want to reach out to me, they can reach out to me there. Book clubs sometimes contact me and they'll say, hey, you know, we're reading one of your books. Would you join us in person if they're nearby, or on Zoom? And I love doing that, because let's face it, you know, book clubs are the beating heart of a writer's livelihood. And I have 4 kids who all want shoes. So, you know, so anytime somebody wants me to join them, because they have the best snacks. So love to do that. But yeah, on the website, we are soon about to do the cover reveal for the World War II book. And we've got a great pre-order offer that will be happening. And so that's why that the newsletter part at the very top there, where people can sign up to join my newsletter, is really important, because I've got a huge order. I wrote a short story recently. Short meaning 40 pages, because I don't do short very well, I guess. But that's coming out in an anthology in March. So I'm kind of excited about that. That was a whole different thing. That's really terrifying, writing short stories. It's very scary.
Well, I have to say, I love your website, by the way. It's very powerful. It draws you in.
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, I can't take any credit for that either. I've got some talented designer type people who do that, but yeah.
But you've got the right team. That's what it really matters. You've got the right team.
That's something I try to do, is I really try to surround myself with people who are more talented at those things than me. And thank goodness for them. So.
Well, you're doing a great job. And I'd love to have you come back and read to us. We would love to have that. That would be fabulous.
I would love to. I would absolutely adore that.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to spotlight you again. Of course, we've been showing your contact information, but for people who are listening on a radio station or on a podcast platform, what is the best way for people to connect with you, to purchase your books, to reach out?
Well, to purchase my books, you can go anywhere to your favorite independent bookstore, your local bookstore. You can go online. You can go to the usual suspects like Amazon. You can get signed books at my website. If you want to connect with me, you can go to my website and you'll see the buttons to find me on social media. I'm active on Instagram and Facebook and all those places. So most recently last night I was cooking. I was posting my cooking fails for Thanksgiving. So, you know, you can see that. Life at the Funny Farm. It's not just about writing. Actually, I don't post about writing a whole lot. It's mostly just about life at the Funny Farm. So I invite you to come join me on social media, where we're always having fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. And I do hope you will come back and visit with us and read. And also, we've got other shows that are about different topics. You have so much to offer to people across the world. So I thank you for taking the time, especially on Thanksgiving. And I wish you a beautiful day. And thank you for sharing.
And to you too. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And it's a beautiful Thanksgiving day. So very grateful to be here.
Thank you. As am I. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks to each and every one of you. Please do reach out to TOSCA LEE. She has an incredible story, as you've just heard, and she's a real person and she cares. She just mentioned about how she was reading over on Facebook Lives, connecting with people who are following her and just sharing her stories. She's got so much expertise in so many different areas, and I love that about her. It's about being curious, about embracing life, and about seeing what else is out there. do connect. That's what we're all about here on this platform. People are coming and sharing their expertise. You've got her contact information. Go over to her website, reach out to her, get her books, let her know what your thoughts are. You don't know where it's going to go. All right. Thank you again for being here on this beautiful Thanksgiving Day. We are going to be pausing for a couple of hours so I can go get exercise. Yay. And then we'll be back this afternoon with the film and music show. If you'd like to be a guest on any of our shows, please go over to our website. It is usaglobaltv.com. Book your session. If you'd like to have your opportunity to be on television, maybe you want to be a co-host or a host or a panelist, do reach out to us. We are finalizing our 2023 calendar. We've got a couple of opportunities left. Go over to usaglobaltv.com/contact us. Thank you again for being here. We'll see you again. Happy Thanksgiving.